We're back. Today, Howie Hawkins announced that he's seeking the Green Party's nomination for governor. In the 2010 gubernatorial race, he came in third on the Green Party line, running on a Green New Deal platform. Howie is a co-founder of the Green Party in the U.S. Since 1967, he's advocated for labor unions, peace movements, and the environment. Like the Working Families Party, he's a critic of this year's state budget. Howie joins us now in the studio. How are you doing, Howie?
I'm doing great.
Maybe we could start by me asking, why are you here today? What are you going to be doing today?
I'm announcing that I'm seeking the Green Party nomination for governor. I expect to get it and expect to be running against Governor Cuomo the rest of the year.
And tell us a little bit about yourself. You're up from the Syracuse area?
Yeah, I'm a working teamster. I unload trucks at night at UPS. And by day, I advocate on these issues we're talking about.
And you've run before for public office. You ran for governor 4 years ago, and you've run for city council in Syracuse?
Yes, I've come close. I've come as high as 48%, 96 votes short of being a councilor up there. Now, so we're not just a small protest party up there. We're the second party. We've surpassed the Republicans in Syracuse.
Maybe you could explain, again to listeners, the Green Party. What's it about? Who started it, and how long has it been around?
Well, we started in this country in 1984 in a meeting in St. Paul, Minnesota. We're going to have our 30th anniversary there this summer. And what inspired us was the Greens in Germany getting, I think it was about 25 people into the equivalent of Congress. And they were talking about cleaning up the environment, protecting the environment, as well as economic justice and social justice and peace and grassroots or participatory democracy. We want to get the people directly involved at the grassroots in governmental structures that hold our elected officials accountable on an ongoing basis. So all those things were things we were talking about in this country since the 60s, you know. Participatory democracy, which the German Greens took from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Civil Rights Movement in the South. So we needed a political party because the Democrats and Republicans were not speaking for us or our issues.
And what's the difference between the Greens and the Working Families Party? It sounds like on a lot of these issues you're on the same wavelength.
On policy, we're close. On a lot of issues, we're the same. On others, you know, there's some minor differences. The main difference is on strategy. We think the left needs an independent voice where we act and speak for ourselves. Working people in this country aren't voting because they're solely alienated from both parties. They're funded by the 1%. And while they might give us working people a little lip service, they're not acting on our behalf. And so most of us have dropped out. Working Families says, vote for the Democrat on our line and it'll send them a message. And we think the message to that Democrat is, they'll vote for me anyway, so why should I do what they say? The Greens say we act and speak for ourselves and make the Democrats and the Republicans compete for the votes because we're putting out policies that people like. The Democrats need to come our way if we start getting votes on those issues, or we'll get elected. And that's really what we want to do. We're not just about influencing the Democrats and Republicans or lobbying them. We're about replacing them.
Maybe you talk a little bit about Governor Cuomo. Obviously, you know him. You've been around New York for a while. You were around when his father was governor.
Yes, I was.
So what do you think of the job he's done in the last 4 years?
Well, I think he's represented his funders well. In the most recent report, the 1%, the 733 people who gave him over $10,000 each. He's only got 4,300 contributors, and that's rounding up.
And he's raised $33 million.
From those people. 81% of his contributions are over $10,000, 45% are over $40,000. Less than 1% is $1,000 or less. So, you know, that's who he represents, and he's done a good job for them. He's given them tax cuts. He's imposed austerity on the rest of us. He's cut our schools. You know, this so-called gap elimination adjustment.
For school districts.
Yeah, that's a euphemism for we're going to cut the schools to balance the state budget so we can give tax cuts to the rich. That's Governor Cuomo. We say we need to go back to the tax structure we had in the 1970s. We could generate 25 or 30 billion more dollars from the stock transfer tax, from the more progressive income tax, and cutting out $7 billion in corporate welfare. That Cuomo's own tax commission, they did a study. They found out that corporate welfare had actually not created jobs with the people that got the welfare, the corporations that got the welfare, had actually lost jobs. So that's a waste of money. Put that back in the budget, fund the schools, put people to work, tuition free at SUNY, CUNY, and community colleges. There's a lot of things that we need, And they're saying we don't have the money. Our economy is like tripled since Mario started being governor.
Right.
But the tax structure is flatter. We're at a 65-year low in the proportion of state funds going to the schools. And Cuomo says, more money, that's not the answer. Well, in my school district it is, because we've laid off a quarter of the schools, staff of the schools
Right.
over the last 4 years. We have a water main break every 2 days. We have sewers backing up. That happened in my building. The gas mains are breaking. The same week they had that explosion in Harlem, we had a gas main break outside. They had this hissing sound sucking gas out of the ground for 4 days. Nobody could sleep. We got potholes. The county's coming in to pave roads with their county budget in our city. Our schools are in the foot. They're closing senior centers, fire stations.
Well, this is part of the tension between the mayor of Syracuse, Stephanie Miner, who's a state Democratic co-chair, and Governor Cuomo. They seem to be not on friendly terms as a result of her criticizing him over his budget and spending priorities and so forth.
They have tension because I think she called him out in the New York Times, and he didn't like that. On policy, they're pretty much the same. She did ask for $16 million for infrastructure, but she's not asking for a restoration of revenue sharing. We got less than 1% of the state budget going to revenue sharing. The original standard was 8%. If we had 8%, we'd have about $500 million for Syracuse to do the things we need to do to fix up our city and get our schools going again. She does not ask for that revenue sharing. She says mandate relief. Like Rob Astorino and the Republicans, like most of the Democrats. By mandate relief, they mean cut the salaries and pensions of our public workers, change the labor laws so we can go after them. When Detroit won that court decision, they could go after the pensions of the Detroit public workers in this bankruptcy. She right away went to the press in Syracuse and said, you see that, public workers? You need to make concessions or that's going to happen to you. That's not what we say. We say tax the rich like we used to, not soak them, just they need to fill their
Sure.
public responsibilities, share the revenues with our communities, and then let us decide how much to use that for restoring schools and services and how much to cut property taxes. Cuomo's property tax thing is a gimmick. It's only a few years. It's a small check if you get it. You only qualify if you stay within the tax cap, and it's one size fits all from the top down. So we know better in our own communities how much we need property tax relief, how much we need for services. Restore the revenue sharing. The state should pay for the mandates. It's our taxes we paid anyway. And then let us in our local community set our own priorities instead of having the governor, do another state mandate on us.
Well, it's timely. Right before the show was starting, I was reading the Yahoo News feed, and they have a story by Reuters saying that corporations now are keeping about $2.1 trillion overseas, and this is American corporations, to avoid taxes here. And the number one corporation that's doing this is General Electric Company. They have about $110 billion offshore so they don't have to pay tax. And Apple, I looked at it on an Apple computer, and Apple's doing the same thing. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it illustrates why the trickle-down economics that Cuomo and Astorino are promoting, which is basically give tax cuts to corporations. We got tax-free manufacturing, the bank tax is removed, we got tax-free zones around the universities, as if the capitalists need more cash. It's not just that $2.1 trillion overseas, it's another $3 trillion here in the United States between bank reserves and corporate liquid assets. They have plenty of money to invest. The problem is working people don't have the money to spend. There's no demand. So that's why one of our things is let's raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour so people got purchasing power. And I know some people think, wow, it's only, just got to $8 in this state and it's $7.25 nationally. But $15 an hour is about what we asked for in 1963 at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And they wanted a $2 minimum wage. Today that's worth $15.29. I mean, we are still in the same situation we were in 1963 when we were about to get civil rights and voting rights. And then the question is, how do we get economic justice and security for all the people? And there's a whole freedom budget that came out of those leaders, Martin Luther King and A. Philip Randolph, and they laid it out. We should have the right to a job, a living wage, a living income for those who can't or shouldn't work, health care for everybody, affordable housing. And where are we now? We've actually gone backwards. Our wages on an hourly basis are lower. Schools are as segregated as they were then. And you go through the whole list of things, we have not advanced. So we're facing the same problem we faced in the mid-'60s.
Right.
And I believe it's because we don't have an independent party of the left that speaks for the working people of this country and doesn't try to do this political ventriloquism, which is what I would say the Working Family Party are trying to do, and the liberal lobbyists. They're trying to get the Democrats to act and do the right thing. But that 1% funding that I described with Cuomo, that speaks a lot louder than a vote on a ballot line for the same candidate of a major party. So that's why we need to act and speak for ourselves independently.
It's a difficult job that you have ahead of yourself, I guess. You guys are a small party. You probably don't have any money, right? In terms of campaign funds?
Well, I ran the last campaign on $45,000.
$45,000.
Our goal is to raise 4 times that, about $200,000. I think if we can get 5,000 contributors, average $40, that's $200,000. That's definitely something we can do. That won't enable us to do an ad war at the scale that Cuomo can with his $33 million.
Right.
But it's enough to hire field organizers and get out into the communities. We got social media. There's a lot of ways.
Yeah, because is it a little bit easier this time around, do you think, compared to past campaigns? It seems like a lot more people are online and they're doing social media and so forth, free stuff.
Yeah, well, we're losing net neutrality. That may be closing up for us. But right now, yes. There's so many cable channels now, it's really hard to buy an ad that everybody sees. Like you used to be able to go to the 3 networks and you got it. Now you got hundreds of stations to spread those ads around. Meanwhile, if something goes viral and your base is finding out about it, you're competing effectively with all the millions that the major parties may spend. So, I think we got a fighting chance.
Now, if people want to get involved with the Green Party, are there chapters of it all over the state? How does that work?
It does, and people can Google Green Party of New York State and get to our state webpage, and that will get you into the network. They can go to my webpage, howiehawkins.org, and we can sign you up there and get you hooked up too.
Now, any discussion of any debates in the fall? Do you think you're going to be on the same stage with Governor Cuomo and Rob Ascarino if he's the candidate?
I expect to, and if the media organizations of this state do their job, they will include me because we're a serious campaign. We're going to raise serious money. We, last time, with very little media coverage, came in 3rd out of the 7 races. I think we were kind of ignored. I'm from upstate, Syracuse. I think the New York City media kind of sees me as an upstate hick working a night shift at UPS. He's not going to do well. Well, I did better than all the ones they were. We had the Madam, we had the Rent is Too Damn High, we had the black candidate trying to get the black vote.
Bringing back bad memories here.
Yeah.
So how many votes did you get back in 2010?
Just short of 60,000.
60,000. Wow. So do you think you're going to do better this time?
Yes, I think there's a lot of discontent in sectors that I've described, particularly public workers and parents of school children, and I think we're going to appeal to working class people that have not been voting because they don't see anybody speaking up for them.
One other question I'd like to ask you, we're running out of time, but obviously in upstate in your area particularly, fracking is a big issue.
Right.
And what's your position, and what do you have to say about hydrofracking for
Well,
gas?
we want to ban it. We don't want any more new fossil fuel infrastructure. We want to commit to 100% clean energy by 2030. And we have a peer-reviewed study in energy policy by a bunch of economists and engineers around New York and headed up by a guy from Stanford, Mark Jacobson. And in 2010, I was alone pretty much in calling for a ban on fracking. Most of the environmental movement was either for natural gas as a bridge fuel, they were pro-fracking, or they said we need to study it. But over the course of my campaign, the anti-fracking movement was growing. We got the demand from them. They were grassroots Greens in the southern tier. And by soon after the campaign, suddenly there were funded groups calling for a ban on fracking. And they've been out there canvassing. And, we've held off the biggest investors from China to Saudi Arabia to ExxonMobil here in the United States who want to push this. And we've held them to a standstill. But what we want this year is we want Sheldon Silver to put the ban fracking legislation to a vote. We want Cuomo to take a position. We're afraid he's going to sit on the fence, and if he gets reelected for governor, he's going to run for president, join the national consensus in the Democratic Party that's pro-fracking, and we're going to get fracking in New York. So, we're going to push hard to get at least people on the record before the election.
Well, you guys have definitely got him concerned about protests and so forth. He had his beer summit yesterday, and the security was so tight, and I presume they didn't want any protesters in there. But anyway, Howie Hawkins, thank you for coming in, Green Party candidate for governor of New York.